Hi, everyone, and welcome to another Parents' Evening with Into Games. And today we have Creative Assembly. Video games are the UK's biggest and fastest growing creative industry, combining creative, technical, and people facing roles across the workforce of over 30,000 talented individuals from all walks of life. I know because I am one of them. It's incredible to see how many people can get into this industry and really succeed. Whether your child is an avid coder, artist, social media whiz, or a history buff, there is a role out there for you, and we are going to find it and help you along the way. Tonight, we'll be hearing from some of the roles available in games that straddle creative, technical, and people facing disciplines, and the subjects in school that can best prepare them for a future career in the games industry. So, we want to give you some information to help guide you all in your life and where you can take your first steps into the games industry. And we have some really amazing guests with us tonight. We have Joanna Green from Creative Assembly, Paul Tan, Callum Glover, and Andy Robertson, all here to talk about how to get in the games, about the games industry in general from various different standpoints. So, right now, we're going to start off with our first speaker, Joanna Green from Creative Assembly. Hi, Joanna.
Hello, nice to see you.
Lovely to see you as well. And I know that you have some amazing information about things going on at Creative Assembly.
Yes, yeah, hopefully I'll be able to give a good overview of the different roles within the industry today. So if you can bear with me, it should be really nice and informative for you all. I'll just get started then. So just to begin with, I just thought I'd give a very quick overview of actually who we are, who is Creative Assembly. So we're a game studio. In the UK, we're based in Horsham in West Sussex. And as you can see, we've actually won Best Places to Work within the industry for the last 6 years, which is really exciting for us. We were founded in 1987. So with a development history spanning over 35 years, Creative Assembly is one of the largest and longest running game studios in the UK. We were purchased by Sega in 2005, and we're now home to almost 850 world-class professionals working both here in the UK and in Bulgaria. So we're best known for the long-running Total War series, which has sold over 20 million copies. CA has also grown as a developer of premium console titles, with the critically acclaimed Alien Isolation back in 2014. We set a standard for survival horror, and in partnership with 343 Studios, we brought our strategic expertise to the Xbox with Halo Wars 2. We're now in full development of our new first-person shooter, Hyenas, and with other new announced projects along the way. We're really excited when we'll be able to announce those. Meanwhile, Total War continues to build on a successful partnership with Games Workshop and take opportunities to branch into new business models and new territories with our record-breaking Total War 3 Kingdoms. So really exciting, lots of different projects going on all at the same time. So very exciting place to work. So as I said, I'm going to be talking today about the roles in the industry. I'm actually the corporate social responsibility lead at Creative Assembly. So I sit within the recruitment team, but work on our legacy project, which is our education outreach platform. I organise all of the schools outreach we do, and also work with industry bodies and partners as part of our education provision, whilst also looking after the work we do with a Charity of the Year, which is voted for by our studio. My colleague on my team also works with students at 16 and plus, so we collaborate a lot with colleges and universities as well. So today I'm here to give you a brief introduction to the key disciplines within the industry and what kinds of skills your child could be interested in to begin their career path. So the 8 disciplines that I'm going to talk about are on the screen now. This is not all of them. It's the main ones that are most often referred to. What I'd like to point out at this stage, though, is notice that program is only one of these. A lot of the roles within the others do not actually require programming knowledge, though there are those that do, which as it's National Coding Week, we will be focusing on those as well. So to get us started, we're just going to take a closer look at animation. The animators are responsible for animating the characters and other elements of the in-game environment. So, for example, the gameplay animator creates the assets that move within the game, whereas cinematics create the more film, video footage that you might see as part of a trailer or as the storyline within a game. We have a motion capture studio as part of one of our offices, so they capture live capture a lot of the animation with acting. We bring in actors for that. The technical animators and riggers create the skeleton within each character, which allows them to move in a realistic way. So each requires slightly different skills, as you can see here. So cinematic skills include direction, cinematography, acting, and storyboarding, whereas animation skills might include keyframe animation, motion editing from the motion capture data. And technical skills include the skinning and rigging, the scripting and programming with 3D maths. So you can see the technical role there is where the programming comes in. If a student is interested in this sort of thing, maybe the subjects at schools that they might be interested in are art or computing or drama or something along those lines. That's not exhaustive. None of what I say is exhaustive, but it kind of just hopefully gives you a bit of an overview. So just to give you an idea sort of visually of what those look like, the one to the side is our motion capture studio, and you can see how the real life actors are being captured on the screen. We also have a couple of pictures of where the skeletons in the actual models are used, so you can kind of see how the skeletons and the tools are then used to animate the characters. So moving on, we have art as our next discipline to just have a look at. So art is really, really broad. We have many different types of artists all creating very specific assets and other artwork across the studio. So just to show but a few, concept artists draw designs in 2D that would then get picked up, in our case, by our 3D artists who would model them into what you see within the game. So their skills would be sort of conceptual design and illustration. Our visual effects create the amazing explosions, shadows, smoke, everything like that that you see within the game. So for that, you might need particle effects or sprite sheets. You'll hear from a technical artist a bit later, so I won't shed too much light on that. But they require modelling and texturing, scripting and programming with the 3D maths. Environment arts create the world that you see within a game. So they would use modelling, architecture, foliage, terrain, set dressing levels. And then the character artists more would go for like the characters or creatures that you see. So they would use high-low poly modelling and texturing, for example. UI, which stands for user interface, are all the icons and buttons that you click on a menu, for example. So it's a really interesting role and different from sort of like the other kind of 2D artists and illustrators. And it's a bit more similar to graphics design. So that's what they would do. Again, kind of like subjects school age, looking at kind of like art, design, textiles, to get kind of like those textures within that. So just again, a couple of images just to show sort of the difference between the character artist, the environment artist, and the concept down here. You can see you've got not just the illustration, but also some annotation around that so that you can actually see its design work to give the artist that's actually creating the asset for the game the most information possible at that stage. So next, in audio, we have an entire audio team within the games company as well. So think every sound that's created within a game be it the music, the voice, or the foley, such as the footsteps, wind gusts, crashes. All of those have been recorded and created by somebody. So they're responsible for the soundscape, recording sounds. We have voice actors come in, music edits, designs, and mixes and implements into the game. So different skills within that could include like sound engineering, editing and mixing, studio and field recording, visual scripting, and composing. So some of the subjects again from school for that would be like music or music technology. Physics and maths also play a large part within this. It's also about just being creative. It's not necessarily the sound that you hear when you're playing the game that's actually being recorded. Just to give you a visual of that, like you can be offset recording. Here they're recording sort of like at the seashore, and then in the studio you're using all of the mixing decks as well. So really varied within that and different specialisms that you can get into. The design area, they're the architects of the gameplay experience. So they define the rules of the game and game world, narrative, and oversee creative development from concept to release and beyond. Not to be confused with the artists, the game designers are creating the actual game itself and what the experience would be for the person playing that game. So within that, you might have a systems designer or a level designer, combat, artificial intelligence, AI, narrative. There's the technical again, where you would come across sort of the more programming and scripting within the design element. Writers and UX is user experience designer, and we do a lot of user research as well within this area. So the skills for a lot of these roles would be sort of communication, design documentation, collaboration, analytical skills, problem solving, mathematics, and visual design skills. So again, sort of like school subject wise, it would be the computing, the English, the maths, but also a lot of our designs come from all sorts of different subjects, sort of like it could be history or geography or something like that. Because of the nature of our Total War games, we have a lot of historians within our game designers. So you can think outside the box, and there are all sorts of different ways that you can get into the industry, not necessarily just the like games design course, even though they are really, really useful and valuable as well. We've got production. So our production is more sort of like the development management of the teams in the game from beginning to end. So they organise the creation of the game as well as oversee the game's development, responsible for project management from a business or financial perspective. Here you get different roles within that. So a development manager or a senior producer. We have live operations and executive producers, development directors as well. So the skills there are sort of like the people management, the time management, presenting, communication, experience with Agile and Scrum. So again, there's lots of different ways that you could get into this, but maybe at school age, you'd be looking at sort of business studies, ICT, or English, as well as a few others as well. Just moving quickly on then, we also have quality assurance, which if you want sort of like a more generic term for it, it's game testers, but it's more than that. It's not just that. So they ensure the product and quality of the data, such as bugs, errors, test output results, and user feedback. And they make sure that that's communicated throughout the development team. They're not just playing a game all day, they're really looking at every single different part of the game, trying to find those things, work out why that's happening, and then communicating that round and making sure that seeing that fix from the beginning to the end as well. So really, really important communication skills needed for this role. Their skills might be game testing and automation, as well as written and verbal communication and a strong game area background. So again, you've got the computing, ICT or English coming up through school for that, as well as just a passion. But the passion for game playing goes through most of the disciplines. though equally we have people who don't necessarily play games that come into the studio. So the final one that I'm going to mention at this stage is brand and marketing. Again, a really, really broad area and very difficult to narrow down into one slide, but it creates campaigns for defined audiences about key aspects of the game using social media, reviews, adverts, online communities, dedicated game websites, sales platforms, and face-to-face events. So within there, you've got the brand managers, the product managers, community managers looking after all of the avid players following every announcement of a game, marketing artists, social media managers, marketing coordinators, and PR as well. So skills here could include the audience analysis, creative storytelling, marketing, public relations, relationship and stakeholder management. So here you've got sort of like the business studies coming through again, English, graphics and graphics design, and media studies as well. But a lot broader, a lot of different areas that you can go in, and that's all on site and as part of our company as well. You start to realise why there is 850 people working at Creative Assembly. And just to show a couple of the other disciplines that I'm not going to go into too much detail now, but don't forget that we are a fully operating company as well. So we have the business and planning analytics team. We've got DevOps, we've got human resources, IT, for operations and studio support, and web development as well. And I just wanted to mention that throughout all of these, some of them are mentioned, some of them are not, but soft skills are always important. There's so many different ways that you can build on these. Just to mention a few, I've got teamwork projects, like ways to build them basically. There's teamwork projects, making sure that you know how to work as a team, responding to feedback given by peers. You could get involved with sort of concept art into digital art by different students. One does the concept, one then makes it into the asset that you would use in the game. You could take it in turns. Portfolio creation, it's never too early to start creating a portfolio in the discipline that you're interested in getting into, or your child's interested, I should say. You can go to, there's so many industry talks, assemblies, panels, and things like that that you can attend as well, just to find out more and find out which actual discipline it would be that you would be interested in. Analysing a game that they're interested in and picking out the different elements there, just going through it and actually realising all of the different parts, and you'd be able to see which discipline has kind of picked up that part, and then how it's all sort of integrated all together. And of course, there's virtual work experience programs, as well as in a few cases in person as well. So a few of you may have noticed, but I did deliberately leave one till the end because it's National Coding Week. So I've just put this at the end because a lot of the focus of the rest of the talks will be on that element. So our programmers are obviously responsible for writing the code that bring the game, feature or service to life, making a playable and usable build. That could be, again, lots of different areas you can go into that, but just to name a few, you could have a gameplay programmer actually working on the physical gameplay of a game, the AI, artificial intelligence again, but how when the player does something, how the environment or the other characters around the screen interact and what they do and what cause and effect happens there. Audio, getting all of the audio into the game, tools, graphics programmers and engine programmer, looking more to see how making sure that it's running at the optimum for every computer, so that everybody gets to use it. The skills here are analytical and mathematical, unit testing, problem solving, geometry, linear algebra, GUI skills and calculus. Lots of different subjects there that you come across at school and wonder where it's useful. It's definitely useful here. We operate mainly in C++, but we also use across the studio C#, Python and Erlang. So it's never too early to start learning a programming language and becoming fluent in it, because you're looking at using that language throughout, and that's one of the key things that you would be looking for to get a job, is actually the ability to use the language that we would like, and then abstracting and modelling. So at school, it's the computing, the maths and the physics are the main subjects, but there are obviously a lot more as well. So as you can see, there are many different disciplines and specialisms within games and programming. They all require slightly different skill sets. The responsibilities and skills required of an engine programmer or a software engineer will be vastly different to that of an AI programmer. Enthusiasm to read, practice and experiment with code is equally as important as the other skills, along with rallying together as a team to solve complex problems. Whether you're creating sort of the innovative AI of large armies in Total War, character-driven villains, implementing game user interface, creating tools for our designers, artists and musicians, or building the services powering millions of players' online experiences, these all come under the broad context of programming. However, there are some roles in the industry that I've mentioned that include coding that are not so well known. They include sort of technical animation, technical design, and the roles that my colleagues are now going to be speaking about today. So these require both coding skill set, but also extra knowledge or talent that brings together other disciplines. So that brings me to the end of my talk today. So I'll pass back and look forward to answering any questions that you may have at the end.
Oh, thank you so much, Joanna. That was such a great overview of everything that, like, basically you need to know about all the different disciplines. That was fantastic. Thank you so much.
That's all right, no problem. I hope that wasn't too much overload for everyone, but hopefully there's some really good information there that you can take away.
Oh, completely. There are some really great nuggets in there. And like, as you said, we're going to be focusing a lot on these very specific and niche roles, roles that like I didn't really know about until I started to really dig into like the industry, like technical
Absolutely.
writing and technical art. Like it's such an interesting facet of the games industry that I wasn't aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The more you dive, the more you find out. So
Yeah, completely. So if you're here and you have a child or you yourself are looking for a role in the games industry, like you're in the right spot. Like we hopefully will lead you in the right direction. So yeah, now we are going to have our next speaker in the room. We're going to have Paul Tan, who is the principal tech writer at Creative Assembly. Welcome, Paul.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly. So
Right.
yeah, you're going to be talking about being a principal tech writer and really
Mhm.
like help us to understand more about this like niche role and what it really takes to be a technical writer.
I'll try. Yeah.
To the best of our abilities.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much.
All right. Okay, here I go. Right, let me share the tab. Okay, I think it's up. Yep, I can see it. Right. Okay. Yes. Hi, everyone. So I'm Paul, and I'm a technical writer. So it's National Coding Week. Happy National Coding Week. um, yeah. So I'll, it's this technical writing. It's quite different from any other forms of writing. Well, it's not. It's very opposite to say creative writing, and because it's National Coding Week, so we try to focus more on a bit of code. But I do know that other speakers, my colleague Cal will also speak more on coding as well. But yeah, I'll touch a bit on the bits that are relevant to technical writing. So, right. So, what is technical writing? And I was talking to Joanna the other day, and so this is what I told her, I think, which is that if you would just describe technical writing in just 2 words, it's simplifying complexity. So it's very much less is more. Whereas if you were writing a creative novel and you wanted to describe a scene, and like in a storybook, you would want to use all the words you knew to describe the color, how vast it is, how exciting the place is, and give people a picture. But in tech writing, you actually want to do away with all that. You just want to let people know what they need to know and how they need to do it. So the sort of go through an exercise, and because usually when people already have to they already arrive at a point where they need to do something, then you just want to get on with it. But then sometimes when you're the person who developed a game or an app or something like that, you would know the tool or the game really, really well. And sometimes some people call it the curse of knowledge, because you don't often immediately understand or see how other people new to it might not know, because you might feel it's obvious, but it might not be. So yeah. So this is a sort of brief demo on how tech writing could be when it comes to improving documentation or an instruction or any kind of communication even. So this is a fictional tool, and this could be like a really early draft. Someone just a developer, a games programmer, a coder just wrote something really quickly. They've already made this fantastic tool. I'm now like getting really conscious of actually pronouncing that, but I'm sure you know that word. Supercali. Oh, okay. Anyway, I'll give up. But yeah, so this is it's all really compact, and it's saying a lot, and it's sort of a brain dump. And then someone like me would come along and discuss with other people about it. I might use the tool myself, read the code and see how it's made to understand it and all that. And then this could then become something like this. So this is like the clearer version. So it describes what it is, why is it, what happens when you run it, and then it gives you like a short example. So in this example here, we're possibly making creating a volcano in this editor. And if you just go back, it's like everything is actually from here mostly. It's only been separated with some spaces, clarified a little bit, some personal opinions on whether you need to ponder the implications of your game design. It's just been removed because you don't really know who's reading, and opinions don't really help. So yeah, so this is how it is at the fictional fun assembler studios. So maybe one day I'll start that studio, but not today. Okay, so since it's coding week, this is now another example. Don't worry, I don't have too many examples. It's not a lecture, but this is an example of a piece of code, a fictional piece of code. So again, on the left, it's how it could be a really basic one, and a coder just wrote quick comments in it, and this would be a type of code documentation. For other coders or tech designers, tech artists, or anyone who has a need of reading the game code to use it or improve it, and so on. So here you can see that the function is called splat player, and it describes it by saying it's splats player. So here, one technical writing skill that the technical writers need to learn, and not just technical writers, actually many other people who might do technical writing in their various jobs. This means that this is just not useful because the documentation says the exact same thing. So it doesn't add any more information. It doesn't help anyone. So on the right, we have a bit a better description. So it describes that it's splat player. It takes the two values that are called power and direction, and then further on in the function in this function. So if you don't know what function is in code, depending on the programming language, some might call it method, some might call it function. It's a block of code in part of a larger code base that does something very, very specific. So this function is specifically just to splat a player. And so this describes it, and hopefully it gives the reader or you, or whoever's reading it, just some information that's just more than reading the code. So that's the description. And then at the end here, it's just describing how you would use the function in a brief example. So yeah, hopefully those two examples make sense. But then the other thing that could be misleading is whether a technical writer only writes. So it's also a hybrid role, like technical designers, like technical artists. And if you remember all the various disciplines that Joanna brilliantly went through earlier with all those diagrams, technical writer is sort of a hybrid cross-discipline role. And this is something that's from another technical writing website, but it sort of just illustrates how a technical writer actually a lot of the time of a technical writer's day job is not always writing. You know, you can be in different like game planning meetings and really early different types of tool development meetings to sort of learn and just be included and participate in what's happening. So you'd have an understanding of the development of the game and the various tools to make those games. And then there's a quality assurance QA element of it as well, because as you're talking through with other developers, as you're working to document things together, then it sort of makes you think about things as you're trying to simplify the complexity. And then you feel like, oh, actually, why is it so hard to explain it? And that might mean that, oh, you know what, it's not a documentation or writing issue. Maybe it's a coding issue. You know, maybe we just need to make another function to better to just make this work better. Then we won't have to, you know, crack our heads over how it writes a piece of documentation to explain it. So then maybe some of you might be wondering, then how do you become this hybrid non-typical role? Well, similarly, there's also no typical path. So there are some universities that have technical writing degrees or courses, but you usually find it in the industry, and not just the games industry, in the wider tech industry, or even in finance. Technical writers might come from various different backgrounds, and this is just one example. Me being the example. So just some pieces of text here that describes parts of my background that I feel somewhat helped me become a technical writer. So in school, I've been involved in writing, in editing, and at uni as well. And then the other sort of partly related communication element, perhaps, is in being in the debate team as well. and then that overlaps with my interest in languages, and so even just studying languages or second language or more, if you're that interested, it immediately helps you think of language structure, culture, because culture also helps you build empathy, and that helps with like the QA side of things, because when you write instructions or documentation for anyone, you're usually putting yourself in a reader's or user's shoes, trying to think of how they would use it. It's like support level 0. And then on the other side, then I did study software engineering and game design at uni. And then after that, I was an independent games developer. And what that means is it's almost like if you go back again to Joanna's slides earlier, if you remember it, all those disciplines, when you're an indie games developer, often you're just either one person team, or they're just a handful of you. So you have to do everything yourself. Maybe one day you're being your own HR or finance, or another day you're a designer. You're designing the game, and then you're coding it, and then you're learning and doing some really poor art as placeholders, or maybe you're actually also a good artist with training, and then you're writing some documentation on how people would play the game or install the game and all that. And maybe you have an FAQ. What if the game doesn't work? And all that kind of thing. And then then I guess when I was younger, I had other part-time jobs, and that also helps put you in that sort of gives you that soft skills. And yes, I see a comment here on transferable skills. But yeah, working at IKEA and being a barista at a cafe and all that kind of thing, and and then I had to stop being a games developer at some points, an indie games developer, because sometimes you need to pay the bills, and trying to run your own business can be quite difficult. So I've also worked at enterprise IT roles, and that had some related things as well, like writing knowledge-based articles to support people with their IT issues, or writing things for other system administrators to work together on, and all that kind of thing. And then eventually I ended up closer to the role now, which I joined a company that was making games development platform. And because they were looking for someone with a games development background, who would be interested to also help with their documentation. So there was that, and so yeah, I did a few years of that, and then I guess I was a technical writer. So so if you just didn't remember all that, or if I just said too much, Google also has some resources on learning technical writing, and this is their really short video, which says that every engineer is also a writer. So let's just play. I think it's just a minute or so. Oh, a minute 16.
Hey, what's on your mind?
Quando on y pense, modèle d'apprentissage.
What?
This is to say that when one thinks about machine learning models, one must consider that it is really only as good as the data upon which one trains it on.
Perhaps one isn't the ideal pronoun. Maybe try to personalize this sentence with you as the pronoun. Or here's another idea. Perhaps avoid pronouns, since the point you're making is more about technology and less about people interacting with that technology.
This is to say that when one thinks about
I would recommend omitting that introduction.
machine learning models are only as good as their training data.
Ooh, chérie.
Okay. How do I get out of that now? Right, there we go. Okay, maybe Google should give me a tip as well of promoting them and their and their learning materials. But yeah, so that was that. Hopefully that helps sum it up. Oops, there we go again. Right, so that was a bit on what technical writing is, and we did like 2 short demos on how you would do some technical writing. And Cal, and then later Andy as well will touch more on other aspects of it. But I just wanted to touch on some things as well because I just had some personal experience, and I wanted to promote these, especially Coder Dojo. So I've volunteered at Coder Dojo before, and so what Coder Dojo is, it's a place. It can be anywhere really. People can start one in a school hall or in I don't know, any open space that can be used or rented once a month or once every 2 weeks or once every week, depending really. So there's certain guidelines, and basically most dojos are the same. And so it's like what's written on this slide. But it's for children between 7 to 17 years old, and they can come there to just observe. It's really informal, but those that are regulars would be usually doing one of these things here, like learning to code, or it doesn't even have to. I mean, it tends to be that children like to code games as well because they like to play games and they want to make them and play them. That's encouraged, but it's also for generic coding. So they can even learn web development or make an app, or just be there with other children or other parents, and they're exploring technology. That's really good. I really, really recommend it. You can go to their website, coderdojo.com, and find one. And many parents are actually volunteers, and the one I volunteered at was actually run by a parent who didn't have a programming background, but only because their child was very, very interested in technology and coding and so on. And then and they started a dojo chapter nearby. So yeah, you can visit their website. There's even guidelines on how you would find one or even start one and so on. And then this is just a screenshot of the possible suggestions on what a child can do at a dojo and what you can facilitate as well, if you like. Making a game in Python, or making an app in HTML, or using Scratch to make a chatbot. I guess that's like part game, part app. And then maybe out of these things is also something like Super Mario Maker, if you have if your children are really into the Nintendo consoles. So this is maybe suitable for people who are not wanting to code too much, but yet still learn game design, game development. So it sort of makes you think about things anyway, because it then, when you eventually code your games, it also makes you think, oh, that's why in any game you would place something there, you'd put something here. And if you're then as a parent, you talk to your child about it, even asking them to describe it is sort of an exercise, a technical writing type exercise, because you make them think about it and you're asking them to simplify what they've made, summarize what they've made, and explain it. So yeah, if they don't already have Super Mario Maker, I recommend it. This is just a screenshot of how it looked like as you make a game in Super Mario, and you can drag and drop. This is the editor. So just like the example earlier where I mentioned how you'd make a volcano, this is a better editor, I guess, where you actually make a game. But yeah, Nintendo, hopefully this disclaimer helps. But yeah, so that was it. I hope that's given everyone a good insight into technical writing in game development. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Paul. That was really amazing. I loved that you mentioned your own path, like not going directly into technical writing as well, or it just was
Hmm.
really fantastic. And then also like such great resources. I mean, I love that kids are being incorporated so much more into the conversation of coding and programming.
Hmm. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, there was a break with COVID, and it was much more happening in the before times, but I think it's picking up again. So yeah, even you could visit one as well, Lauren. Maybe volunteer or something.
I know. I mean, honestly, like I was so surprised when I went into my daughter's classroom and saw that they were using Scratch Junior. Like I was just thinking like, like I was letting her use Scratch Junior at home, but like to see it actually in a classroom as well, like I think people are really starting to like really lean into it. So yeah, maybe I will start it at my location, because I think it's so cool. It's so cool to learn about coding and but yeah, no, thank you so much for all
Hmm.
your valuable insight.
You're most welcome. All right, thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. And now we have another guest for you all. We have Callum. We have Callum Glover, who is the technical artist at Creative Assembly. Hello, Callum.
Hello, how's it going?
Not too bad. How are you?
Good, yeah. Good. It's a bit dark in here now, but hopefully the lights aren't a bit too beaming right above my head, but
Oh,
see
it
how
gives
it
a good
goes.
aesthetic. It gives a
Good aesthetic,
good
yeah. Nice
aesthetic.
studio
Yeah.
lighting.
Yeah, no, definitely really good vibes. But yes, no, tell us, please, because technical artist is really cool because it kind of sits between like creative and technical. So I really love to learn more about what this role entails.
Yeah, no, it's definitely it is a weird role. It's a great role. It does straddle between so many parts of the discipline. It's a very interesting role. I'm just going to try and share up my screen while I ramble a little bit. But yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about what is tech art, how I got into tech art, um, how you could get into tech art, and what tech art actually is. So, like I said, my name is Cal. I am senior technical artist at Creative Assembly. I have been here for a little bit over 3 years. It's my first industry role, actually. And for most of the last 3 years, I've been working on the most recent installment of the Total War series, which is Warhammer 3. So, bit about my background. So originally, I wanted to go into architecture. I actually wanted to design buildings, but I wanted to design like some of the most interesting skyscrapers possible. I wasn't sure if I wanted to, potentially end up not being able to do, some of the most amazing projects, and it's a very, very hard position to get into. I wasn't sure if someone's extension was what I wanted to do, as great as they are. So after a lot of looking around for what I could do, I remember being in a cafe in Italy somewhere and having a conversation with someone when I was about 14, and hearing them say that they were a game designer. And it hadn't crossed my mind in 14 years of living that I could do that as a career and that could be my job and I could be paid to do that. But of course you can. So yeah, I then decided I wanted to go and do art in video games. I wanted to do buildings within games. Um, but at the same time, within high school, I could never choose between focusing on my art or on my maths. And I've kind of landed in a sort of the exact perfect role for me in technical art. So after secondary school, I went to Bournemouth University to study animation and VFX. And then within my third year, I focused a lot more on programming. I found a big love for scripting throughout my studies. And so, yeah, my final year was a mixture of environment art, programming, a little bit of scripting. The screenshot here is my final project from university. So, what is technical art? None of us know. None of us know. We do know. But it's a very, very vague sort of job description. It tends to be very similar across studios, but everyone has their own interpretations on it. So we're basically somewhere between art and programming. Um, we kind of do the programming that's way too arty for the programmers, or the art that's way too programming for the artists, which I'm sure makes absolutely no sense. And yeah, hopefully, maybe it does. I don't know. We really don't know. Um, But yeah, typically this means if we've got some effect on the screen that might be, I don't know, for example, in a second I'm going to show you some lava, and the artists, they can paint very, very good lava, but lava needs to move, it needs to have some depth to it, it needs to look like it's actually hot, and that typically involves some programming. But the programming involved there is typically a lot more visual, it's a lot more arty, that someone who's typically just focused on programming in C++ will not know exactly what they're doing with that. Um, Often they do, but sometimes there are effects that are just a bit more visual and they end up on tech art side. We are sometimes just a translation service, I guess, between art and programming. We typically, or me, for example, I understand what's happening with render programming, but I don't know how to do it because it's very complicated. And while I said I've previously done art, I'm terrified of modeling characters, for example. I can't model characters, I'm very bad at it, but I know how they're made. So we're a good translation service. So this is an example of some programming art, or is this arty programming? You can see some lovely lava that we made back on Warhammer 3, and just poking behind it, you can see this little spirally network of nodes that actually makes up this lava within our engine. So what is programming? Uh, Programming is a bit easier to define than tech art, but at the same time, maybe it's not, because programming can be a lot, but it's not always what you think. It's not always some code. It's not always some matrix green text going around the screen. It's often a lot of Google searching. But basically, the quick answer is if you can see it anywhere in a game, programming was involved somewhere. Anything. You can think of it as something that's very traditional, something that might be the artificial intelligence of a character. What causes it to move? What causes it to come and attack you? What causes it to come and help you? What makes something interactable? And some of it may be a bit more vague. It might be a bit more visual, like, for example, the lava we saw before. What makes the lava look like lava? What defines how that looks on the screen? Why does the sky look like the sky? And how does the water reflect the objects around it? It's a little bit harder than you might think from the surface level. And I've put at the bottom here, it's not all code. I put it with an asterisk. Technically, everything will eventually be code, but that doesn't mean it has to be written as code. Some of the work we do within technical art, for example, uses what we call visual programming or node graphs. And these are basically more visual representations that are, you're not writing lines and lines of code on a screen, you're just sort of playing around with nodes and you can see things happening in real time. I'll show you some of that in a bit. So again, going back to this, none of this lava you see on screen was handwritten by me. It was all just written in the snow graph you can see poking behind. So while I know what the maths and what the code being generated it would roughly be, I didn't need to at any point go, how the hell do I write this line of code? It just was written for me. I wrote it using the, again, the node graph you can see. So this is actually what that looks like, and it looks like a lot. It looks like a lot, and there's no way looking at that you're going to know where to begin. But this is a brilliant thing with visual programming, is that typically you can very much build from the ground up. So at any one point of this graph, you can sort of see roughly what it's looking like on the screen. You can step back to one point. You don't need to worry about what your variables are called. You don't need to worry about any functions. Things just sort of a lot more tangible, and because they're visual, I have quite a visual memory, for example. So I, admittedly, because this is my work, I can remember where, just from sort of muscle memory, where things are within this graph. So for me, it works quite well. So here's an example of how you might be able to see a visual effect. So this is a game jam that I participated in actually about a year ago nearly now. And what I'm about to show you is the node graph that was used to create this effect. You can see the sort of tractor beam effect that will come up here. So this game was made within Unity. So this is a screenshot of the Unity node graph. And you can see Unity has a lovely, lovely feature where you can see at any one part of your node graph what is happening to your data. So you can see this is the final effect here, but you can see we're starting and we're sort of slowly building up this effect. We're going, I think we are, again, it has nearly been a year since I created the shader, so it's been a while, but you can see we're sort of creating this gradient that slowly scrolls upwards. And then here we're defining it into sort of more banded areas, and we're softening it a little bit, and then we're, again, sort of adding some more lines in between. And then to get the sort of other in between, I guess, invisible zones between these tractor beams, we have a gradient that goes the other way. So you can see that I think I would know how to write this as code, but it's easier to be able to go, well, I can see that this is a gradient that goes across the screen, left to right, this goes up and down. You can see how this all combines. So sometimes no graphs can not always be the greatest example. You can see this is what I've called the scary math slide, which is actually a very simple, well, I say very simple, it's a very frequently used function, for example. It's normally included by default in most engines, and we've already written it here, for example, at CA. But this is a scary looking mass equation and a somewhat originally scary looking graph that evaluates it. But what we can actually do is we can step through some of these terms in this function one by one. So for example, here you can see that these two, this camera position, this world position, we're subtracting those here in the purple highlight. We're then normalizing it, which means that we're making sure that this sort of direction offset is exactly 1 unit in length. This is where the technical gets a bit, well, the art gets a bit technical, I guess. But just some math terms that you become very familiar with when you work on this day to day. But yeah, some jargony terms I'm sure I'll try not to confuse it all with. But then you can see again we can extend out. We're now getting what's called the dot product with the what's called the normal vector. Then getting the maximum of that and 0. And then we can continue stepping out. We're taking that away from 1, raising it to the power of this value called f. You can see here we've then got this other term where we're just getting this thing called a Fresnel bias. We're subtracting that from 1. You can see that there we're now going to multiply these two together in this node. Step a bit forward. But when I said earlier that everything becomes code eventually, this node graph, for example, will eventually be generated into this line of code in game. And while this line of code does look a little bit different to this line up here, I'm sure you can probably see the similarities. For example, here we got Fresnel bias is here. We've got 1 minus Fresnel bias here. There's some order differences here, but this is roughly the same line of code, and that's all generated by this. But this is an example where it might actually be easier to write the code rather than do the graph, because this is probably a bit more readable. When you're using node graphs, typically you do have to sort of work almost inside out, whereas what you might want is just to write the code. So this maths, just for some context, it's an effect called Fresnel. It's basically like a sort of an edge highlight that you'll get around an object. Think something being lit by a big bright light from behind. You're going to see some of that light around the edges. So yeah, going back to that node graph before, you can now see that it's easier to step from one area of the graph forward. So this graph, you can see all these very spidery wires, and you can see that we slowly sort of work our way through this big old network all the way out to the output. And for reference, this is not an average shader. Most shaders are about a quarter of the size of this maximum. This is the worst example I came up with, just in case. Scary math slide, scary graph slide. But not all node graphs are created equal. Houdini, for example. Houdini is a piece of software that we are using quite a lot nowadays. It's great for creating content. Here, for example, I've got a screenshot of this lovely lizard man here and what's called LOD meshes, or level of detail meshes. They're basically small optimizations of a mesh that make them run better on your computer. So typically, the further you move away from a character, you'll eventually go from seeing all of these very detailed triangles, and we'll slowly step down, and step down. And this is an example of some new work we've been doing to see how we might be able to create some of these meshes. But you can see here we've just got 4 nodes. We're bringing some data into the software. We're converting it from our format in 3ds Max to Houdini. We're then generating our LOD meshes. We're then translating it back to Max, and then we're outputting it. Obviously, this node is going to need to have a definition for everything it does, and we can actually go into this and we can see what it does. So in Houdini, you just double click on that and you can dive in. Houdini is great because you can continue to dive into nodes. You can see what everything does. So it means that at any one moment you can very much simplify what you're looking at. You don't need to worry about writing hundreds of lines of code. Houdini is very good in that you can, again, this is sort of an example of a kind of confusing node graph. This big orange section here is a bit confusing to explain. But essentially Houdini works by, you step in and you do something in this node, and then you can see we go down a node, we do a little bit more, You can see we then enter this loop, and while it looks a bit confusing, the essence of it is we go, hey, we've got this node, we want to then step down, do something else, do some more, and do some more. So it's very much about breaking up how you approach a problem, which means that you can do some incredibly complex things and make them seem a lot more simple, because you can spend as much time as you want on the individual layers, and then when you connect them together, it's just like playing with Lego. So I mean, again, in here, we could dive in another layer. We could dive into how we actually generate the meshes themselves. We're not going to do that because I did not take the screenshot, but you can see how you could continue to just keep delving into these lines. And when I say Houdini is not necessarily created equal, that's because Houdini actually allows you to, like many other editors, Houdini allows you to write code within these individual nodes. So, for example, within one of these here, you could write some code. So this is an example of some simpler code that might be written inside Houdini, and here's an example of some slightly more complex code. Typically, I think the largest amount of code we've had written in a single node in Houdini has been a few hundred lines, which is far too much normally. Normally, it's very small, readable snippets. But yeah, it's very easy to see how you can move from our shader graphs before that are a lot more visual into something like in Houdini, where you can, again, step through every single part of the process and see what we're doing. And that does actually conclude what I've got. So yeah, that's been me. I hope that has helped you and hasn't confused you too much.
Oh, I mean, it was incredible, honestly. Like seeing those whole graphs and what they create is just absolutely incredible. Like it's just completely beyond my realm of reason, but like I loved how you displayed it and really showed it to us. So
They're
thank you so
great.
much for that.
Thank you. I mean, there's plenty of tools available out there as well. Unity is, there's lots of resources online how to learn it. Same with Unreal Engine. They've all got wonderful node graphs to use, so it's very easy to get
Oh,
stuck in.
yes, absolutely. But I did love the mention of the chaos,
Oh yeah,
like
there's sometimes
the
quite a bit of
chaos.
chaos.
But it's chaos that makes sense. It's our
Mm,
chaos.
exactly. Very pretty chaos.
Yes, very pretty chaos. Perfect. But yeah, no, thank you so much, Cal.
Okay.
And yeah, it's really, really amazing work. And now we are moving on to our next guest, who is Andy Robertson, who is the author of Taming Gaming and
Hello.
also the head of the Family Video Game Database, which is really incredible. Welcome, Andy.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been great. I've been learning and enjoying so much of these talks as we've been going through. So, and I used to be a technical author. We were in the backstage chat, and I was like, oh, that's what I. So,
Yeah, so it's like it's totally within your realm of expertise.
yeah, and so I guess the sort of my part of this puzzle is often sort of talking to parents who maybe don't play a lot of games themselves, and are a bit like, I want to get my child to play more games. Like, should I be encouraging this? Shouldn't I be off and maybe they could be? Shouldn't I be holding off and maybe they could be a dog? But the great news is that if your child loves games, there's this sort of pre-made world that's going to introduce them to all sorts of experiences, and those experiences lead into roles in the games industry in lots of different ways. And so one of the ways I come to schools to kind of uncover the breadth of games that you could play as a family and you can get your kids to play is this database, as Lauren just mentioned. So this is a kind of a searchable resource that is designed for parents, and it does that job that that Paul was mentioning, that I try and sort of see the kind of the wheat from the chaff and just kind of present the details of games, so that in a couple of minutes you can go to a game page. If your child is interested in it, you can read up on it. It's just those highlights, all the kind of key information for parents. And then at the bottom there are kind of alternative games as well. So it's kind of it encourages you to find sort of a breadth of games for your family. Yeah, so that's that, and you can obviously go to taminggaming.com and sort of browse that. So I'm not going to spend too long, diving into kind of how games kind of offer these roads into coding in particular. And so there's some parts of the database this. So one of the things the database has is lots of lists of games, and so you can come down and lists. And one of the lists we've compiled is games where part of the play is actually creating a game yourself. That could be a game builder game where it's designed like Mario Maker to create a platform game. But equally, it could be a game where The play is actually you creating a challenge for your character in the game. A good example of this I was just looking at before we started today was this game called Loop Hero, where you use cards to lay down tiles and create this path around this world. And what you're really doing is level design. You're trying to balance the challenges that you're putting in front of your player so that they can get enough loot, but it's not too hard so that they fail. So in that game, what you're actually doing is a bit of that kind of game role. If we scroll down this list, another game I've used quite a bit with, a little bit like Mario Maker, but it's a bit more kind of specific. And I was reminded of this again, hearing Cal talking about, and what they've done here is take that concept but kind of attach characters to it. So the nodes in Game Builder Gauge are little characters that have a personality, and each personality relates to their function. It's not as complex as the stuff that Cal was presenting. Create, really substantial experiences. And if I just play this video, I'll leave the sound off just while I'm talking. It will give you a feel for some of the work we've done with families. So we took this tool to a bunch of families. We're going to leave it with you for a couple of weeks. We're going to come back, give you some support, and then see what you can make. And many of those families felt like, oh, I'm not sure, will we be able to make anything that's actually a game that will actually work? If we kind of scrub on to kind of later on in this little video, you'll see that essentially all these families were creating things pretty quickly. And we had this kind of gameplay loop where the kids would make something and then get mum or dad to come in and beat it, and then they would adjust it. And there was a real kind of family collaboration. And I think the kind of the game is it really lowers that kind of barrier to entry. But what you're actually doing is learning real character design, and you can instantly see the results. So I think that games like that offer a really sort of quick way in, and obviously it's using hardware that you've already got at home. So this list is pretty long. It's games on a database. If with a list like this, you can pop open the filter and then you can filter it. So you might pick an age, maybe you've got a particular platform. So if you're PlayStation, you could then filter that, and then it would give you a list of games where you're kind of doing this kind of work, but on PlayStation 4. I think that's quite a nice example. Dreams is obviously another really amazing tool where you can do that kind of work as well. But I just wanted to sort of, again, just dip into different areas of the database. You could look in more specific ways at a particular topic. So there's many games that use maths as part of the gameplay. And these aren't kind of maybe what you think in terms of kind of an educational game, teach algebra or let's teach differentiation or whatever the topic is. But these are games where the kind of the nature of player to do increasingly complicated combinations of numbers or kind of probability, statistics, and those sorts of things. But it's wrapped up in service of the game, and so it's kind of the game first. That kind of game fun foot is very much forward, and the kind of the education is almost like kind of collateral learning that comes along with the play. And again, I think kids who maybe would be turned off by kind of a direct, here's how to learn this particular bit of maths. In many of these experiences, if they're into games, then they've got that kind of spark already. And then this is kind of a journey that can then lead them into a career. They have this example up. This is a game where you are doing lots of sequencing. So again, that's a common skill in video games where you've got something you want to achieve, but you need to achieve it efficiently. And so you have to figure out, well, what's the right sequence? And in this game, you're laying down pathways of this tube system so that your little passengers can get to the right station efficiently. And you soon learn as a player of this game, this is about doing it in the right stations, but managing the kind of the flow of the trains around those stations as well. So it's very simple, but it gives you kind of quite a detailed and quite a useful skill that is going to be very transferable. Game Builder Garage we've touched on already. And then sort of the other end of the spectrum, there's some very kind of making almost micro games, and so it can be a bit intimidating. Garage, thinking I'm gonna create a game and it's going to look like a Nintendo platform game, but really, any experience you're creating where someone can interact with it is a very valid sort of game experience. And I love Fancade Game Maker, which is an app. You can play lots of games in it, and then lots of them are just kind of a single touch. It's on a phone interface. Again, if I play the video without sound, you'll just sort of get a taste of the sorts of games that people are making. And what's nice about these things, it's true of Game Builder Garage as well, is you end up with a community of creators around that who will share ideas, who will talk to each other. And as you can see, kind of the variety of experience on offer is kind of endless. And again, that can be really helpful kind of to spark ideas in kids who maybe if they're faced with a kind of a create. If you're coming in and you're connecting with a community like this, then immediately you've got a good starting. Examples. This is another game on the database where again you're laying out a dungeon, so you're kind of doing level design work. And again, you the role of the kind of the dungeon creator, and as you lay cards, again you're trying to balance this so that the characters in the dungeon have an experience. It's hard enough, but it's not too hard. The database also includes board games. I think it's worth saying that play is play, whether that's digital or physical, and there's a huge amount of value in many board games that kids might play. And actually, there's quite a back and forth these days between a love of board games and a love of video games. There's a real kind of board game culture that's on the rise. And so again, if you've got a child who loves video games, there's loads of board games they'll love. And that can open the door to a kind of a wider group in the family. This game in particular is one that my family play a lot. And you lay down these tiles, you're playing the role of these deep sea divers, and you roll dice to go down, you pick up treasure, then you have to come back. But it has this risk of reward, because once you've picked the treasure up, you move slower. And so you have to sort of work to get back to the ship with the oxygen, and you've got this shared supply. And what's happening here is you're making these kind of edge case decisions, which kind of lead into a lot of skills that would be useful kind of in an employment setting. Miyabi is another board game where you're laying geographical tiles here. I won't go into the details; it's a bit more complex. But you're managing multiple systems at the same time. So there's you're creating a sort of a Japanese garden. You need to manage the location of those plants, but also what they're overlapping, and the little lanterns at the top, you turn those down once you've used a column. And that's a common thing in both board games and video games, that kids get very good at kind of managing multiple systems at the same time. This is one we just added today actually to the database, where you're trying to keep kites in the sky, and you lay the card that's the color of the kite, and then you turn over the egg timer in the middle that matches that card. And the challenge is cooperatively, you're trying to keep the kites in the sky and the timer not to run out before you've got through all the cards. And so you have to play the same color again timer before it is empty. But if you do that too soon, all you're doing is just having a very small amount of time with a lot of communication. In this game, and again, whether it's a video game or whether it's a board game, communication is a skill that is of all age, and children in particular get very hot on, because they need that to do well in a game. So I didn't want to sort of spend long here, because really you can dive into the database and you can do a search and find, if you've got an interest in the family, like maybe gardening, pop in, click the search, type gardening, or if it's football, and there'll be articles and game suggestions that will pop up, and pretty much whatever you're interested in, you'll find an experience there. And then that kind of sets you on the road to have a gaming experience that really embraces the whole family. But then naturally that moves into conversations about careers and skills and the sorts of things we've been talking about tonight. So I hope that's useful, Lauren. Does that kind of tick the box in terms of what you're after?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I love the database, and I think the database is so helpful. Every parent that I talk to about it is just like really, really impressed and just surprised like that this type of content exists, right? Like, I mean, I think what you've built is so incredible, Andy, and I'm so happy that you did.
It's great, and that's what I love. It's just putting great games in the way of families, and they kind of just trip over them and have a great time, and then they're off, and then they're off, and they're just finding experiences and going from game to game, and it becomes this kind of lifelong thing that, oh, my kids are going to be playing games their whole lives. Oh, great. Well, let's set them off and equip them so they can do that in a healthy way. So as you can tell, it's work that I really love. So it's not a chore to do it at all.
Oh, it's absolutely incredible and so helpful. So yes, no, thank you so much. And now we're going to open the floor for a bit of a Q&A for everybody. So if everybody wants to come back in, Welcome everybody. We've had a very, very educational night of roles in the games industry as well as creative assembly. And so, I mean, just starting off, I know we talked about like transferable skills. That's something that definitely was brought up a lot. Like nobody's got the same journey into games. Everybody's got a bit of a different flavor of how they sort of started off their journey. So, anybody watching, please submit your questions. But for right now, let's just see, like, what do you feel was like the most helpful, like, soft skill that you think you should really expand upon coming into the industry? How about we'll start with you, Joanna. Like, what's a soft skill that you feel like you transferred in that was really, really helpful for you?
I think the most obvious one really is that element of communication and teamwork sort of thing. The ability to be able to go and talk to people and work collaboratively. You're working, no matter how small or large the game studio that you're working for, you're going to have to work with somebody else. So you need to be able to know how to bounce off. It's not about knowing like that you think that you've got all of the ideas and all of those ideas have to be implemented into the game. You've got to kind of work with the other people and go, actually, these are the bits that do work, but actually your idea was great as well. And let's bring that in. And actually learning how to sort of make that balance between it, I think is a really important soft skill to kind of bring in for any of the disciplines that you do, because you do have to do that on a daily basis.
Oh, completely. Like, especially like empathy, like having empathy for like the different roles as well. It's like, okay, so you want to implement this like really amazing idea, but let's think about like logistically whether or not it's actually possible for the team in order to do this within the scope of time that we have to do this, and like being okay with the fact that like maybe we don't want to cripple our whole our whole department or our whole game just for this really, really, really impressive, like, idea, you know? It is so important. And then how about you, Paul? What do you think?
Yeah, you've touched on empathy and all that. So I think the other thing also is just we kept touching on the different disciplines, and Joanna did a brilliant job of going through the different disciplines. Even though Cal and I have said that our jobs are very hybrid type roles, even if you had a job title that was engineer or programmer, that sounded as if you think, oh, all programmers do the same thing. It's actually not like that as well. And that goes for the same for the other roles. But since it's coding week, yeah, it can be like maybe they're a server programmer, maybe they're a gameplay programmer, and then when it comes to gameplay, maybe they are more on the AI coding side. And there's so many different specialisms. So I guess that for me, what I'm trying to say is, whatever your interest and how you like to do things, it's a creative industry. So get creative by learning all sorts of things, because it tends to be useful in one way or another.
Oh, it's so true. Like going in with like a broader mindset of like what you want to do, it helps you to really find. I think there's a lot of people who are quite I guess, solidified in the role that they're in because of how many different roles there are in the games industry. And like, I think that's the exciting thing, is hearing about how everybody sort of carved their way and found the role that best suited them. But as you said, like, yeah, there's so many different avenues to go with. And then how about you, Cal? What are some of the soft skills that you felt really helped you in your role?
I think mostly for me, it's just sort of always trying to figure out like sort of what the other roles are doing. We've sort of touched upon it, but exploring what they are and getting stuck in, because especially within tech art, we need to talk to so many different teams. We need to know how they're working. Um, we need to understand what they're saying to us so that we can do what they want. So you're sort of always getting like sort of stuck in researching what everyone's doing at any one moment and making sure we never get stuck behind. Because I left university a little bit over 3 years ago, and modeling has already changed a little bit, and it's trying to make sure I'm always on the ball with how that's working. So I think that the main one is just communication across the departments and trying to we always want to please people, but we also need to make the game, and it needs to run well from a tech art point of view. We're very concerned that it's gonna run and it's gonna play nicely, and it's finding the ways that we can sort of get everything working the way people want on time. Definitely.
I think that's a really good point that you touched on as well, was like keeping up to date. Because like, yeah, obviously when you get into the role, it's fantastic, but it's like keeping the relevancy of what you're doing and the understanding of like new terminology and stuff is also like super, super duper important. Do you have any resources that you can recommend to people to sort of like think about how to update your role or update your terminology and that type of thing?
I think a lot of the ones I know personally are typically very software oriented. So, for example, a piece of software I touched upon was Houdini, and Houdini has some very, very good tutorials on the website. They might be a bit advanced for people who are just picking it up who haven't ever used it before,
Sure.
but they are very much. They will show you, how to do something start to finish. There's a piece of software called I can't remember what they called it now. They've renamed it recently. It's Substance Painter.
As
Adobe bought
can
it and
be
they changed the name.
proven.
Yeah,
Yeah, it just proves the point that everything
exactly.
is always changing.
But there's so many blogs out there, and Substance are very good normally with the tutorials, where someone who's never used the software before could pick it up, and you can get like a really beautiful output within about a day of working in it. So there's so many different resources out there.
Yeah. Oh, that's so great. And then so we did have a question in from our watchers. Thank you so much. Sue Richardson, who said, my 14-year-old son is taking computer science and is interested in gaming. He needs a work experience placement for next spring. Is that something that would be appropriate to like sort of explore?
Yeah, I can take that one.
Sure.
We can we don't necessarily, like as CA sort of thing, we don't necessarily offer like just a small short-term work experience placement. I know the sort of one that you're after there. We can, obviously, you're more than welcome to email in, look at our website. We've got like the legacy inbox is the best place to come and find us. We're more than happy to give more information and give sort of like help and advice on specific items. But the natural placement in-house isn't something that we're able to offer, but some places do. So do have a look around. It is an appropriate thing to look at doing within the games industry, absolutely. There's also quite a lot of virtual work experience opportunities, which are really good to explore. We've got one on the UExplore platform. So there are ones like that you can look into for sure. So that's what I would say. I'd say feel free to contact us with that kind of thing, but we wouldn't be able to actually do like the placement. But there are lots and lots of different opportunities that you could get involved in to get into the industry for sure.
And then how about games to help with their skills? Andy, I think like you definitely have some advice on this, I hope, in terms of just like, cultivating those sort of like soft skills. Do you have any sort of recommendations on games that we could check out?
Yeah, I think going after games which aren't kind of popular, like really become a connoisseur of games that are on the edges and seeing what games are pushing the boundaries. And there'll be some of those unusual games that make it into the middle. Like at the moment, everyone's playing this trombone. What is it? The trombone game that's kind of doing the rounds. And that's
so great. I love it.
It's so funny and it's so kind of shareable. But look at those as a kind of a creator. Like, well, what was it about those experiences that meant that one broke through and others didn't. So actually, how you're actually playing your game. So like diversify your kind of diet, because it's quite tempting to just end up playing great, but there's also this variety as well. So like looking around, finding games. But when you find a game, whether it's big or small, think, well, what is it at this game that means it's got that sort of tactility to it, or it's got this thing that you play it, and you've got to tell someone about it. It's, you read the book and you want to lend it to one of your friends. And so what is it about games as media that is actually doing this? And that takes you into quite a whole different sphere of looking at games, and it takes you in sort of interesting directions, which I think are really useful for careers.
Oh my gosh, completely. I love like the one terminology. I think we sort of I was thinking about it recently with regards to like YouTube content creation, which is like what is everybody going to talk about at the pub? Like that type of thing. And like, what is the sort of like what is the thing that you talk about with your friends at the pub, or what's something like, interesting about it. Like I think that's really fascinating to sort of talk about like what is the thing that you're taking away from it, why why is it that like this is so effective and so good. So I think that's really fantastic. And then one of the biggest questions that we sort of always get in the space is about university, because I think everybody's always so curious about, whether or not to send their kid to university, because obviously like it's expensive. You never know if it's the right choice. You never know if you're going to get the right information and that type of thing. So I wondered if any of you would feel comfortable like giving your take on university versus just going into trying to go into the games industry, sort of with through things like game jams, and actually just giving it a shot that way, like really developing your skills, your personal skills in your personal lives instead. So would any of you feel free to take that question?
I always can. So I guess like when we get like someone's CV come through, for example, tech art is mostly we're very art focused, so we're looking for visual things, but we also like to know if maths knowledge is good. But typically the maths we're using, it's not like university grade maths. It's I did do it at university as part of my course, but it's all covered under A-level maths, for example. I remember it being the maths I really didn't like at school, and then I decided that I actually did like it after leaving school. But the main thing we normally would look for is we don't mind if someone has the degree or not on tech art. It's about if they have the skills there, and a lot of those skills can be picked up outside of university. I know for myself, for example, I would have found it very hard to have focused and got that portfolio out. So university for me sort of forced me to make my portfolio and forced me to learn those skills. But I don't think it's ever anything on a tech art side where like, oh, you need to have a software engineering degree. That would be, it'd be great, but at the same time, we're not going to utilize everything in a software engineering degree in tech art because it's very art focused. We need to create artistic effects. We have people on our team that have come from like a pure art background. And we have other people that have come from like military defense programming. So it's a massive range. So it's really it's hard to say. I know that's a very non-answer, but it's like if it was a great experience for me. It was very stressful, but it was also very fun. So I think it always depends on the individual, but I don't think it's like a you must have this. But I think for a lot of people, it can be the push to make sure you're developing those skills.
Oh, I think it's such a great thing to say, because yeah, like it is so true. Like there isn't one size fits all for everybody, right? Like it's not something that you can just physically say like, you have to go here, or this is the right choice for you because it was the right choice for me. And I think that that's really, really lovely that you said that. But yeah, you never know where you're going to end up. And I think it's always so stressful to ask a 16, 17-year-old. You have to make the choice of what your career is going to be right now for the rest of your life, and this is what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And it's quite a loaded thing to do. Um, So, I mean, I think we have time for one more question. So I guess, as a final takeaway, what are some of the next steps that you all think that we should take away from this? What our watchers should sort of take away from this event and um, really try to push forward our careers and our choices, and then also like where can we find out more about what you all are doing at Creative Assembly?
I can start.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the biggest take home, I'd say, if you're going to go away and have a look, I'd say go and research the different disciplines, go and find what you're interested in, follow sort of the path and your own passion. I feel like we obviously covered a lot today. If you're interested in the coding elements, hopefully you've seen, there's a lot of different areas that you can go into, either rather broad or really niche. So go away, do your research on those, and then find your path through from there. If you find the thing that you enjoy and work towards that you're going to enjoy what you actually do as a job. I'd also just say, sort of like from our side at CA, we've got a lot of information on our website. We've got a series called Creative Chronicles that expands a lot on all of the different disciplines within the role. As I've mentioned, we've got our legacy project, which is our education outreach as well. And we're more than happy, again, on the website, there is a place where you can contact us directly, and we're more than happy to field questions backwards and forwards amongst yourselves as well. So please do get in touch. I'm more than happy to do that. Yeah, I think they're the two main things from me.
Oh, fantastic. And how about anybody else? How about you, Andy?
Yeah, I'd say, play games with open eyes, and think about what experiences you want to make. That might be a game creator, that might be something like Dreams, but equally it might just be pen and paper. Take those steps into imagining, and if you're doing that with the support of a parent, I think it's a really powerful thing to do.
Oh, completely. Really break down that barrier and get parents involved with gaming with their kids. I think that is really, really important. And then how about you, Paul or Cal?
You want to go first, Cal, or?
Yeah, sure. I don't mind.
Okay, go.
I'd just say just get stuck in. It's funny that you touched on Dreams there, Andy, because I remember like years ago, Little Big Planet was one of the reasons why I wanted to go into game design, because
Oh,
I'd sat there making my own little games for ages. But yeah, getting stuck in, whether that is creating things in something like Mario Maker or in Dreams or something similar, or if it's doing small game jams. Just like it doesn't matter if it's a good game. Game jams are like, they're not there to create great games. They're there to create games. And like, as far as whenever I've seen a game jam, I just want to see what people have done. I don't mind if it's 10% of the game. It's what they did with their time and how they did it. It's just getting stuck in it is the important thing, I think. Figuring out
oh
what
my
you like to
gosh.
do.
Completely. I love game jam games. Like it's just like one of those things where those projects you just they don't always work out. You fail at it, but you learn so much from the process of actually creating a game in such a tight deadline. Like it's such a great learning opportunity with game jams. And also, as you were saying before, Joanna, getting to learn to like interact with people and be a part of a team, like game jams are great for that. And then we'll end with you, Paul. What would you say?
Yeah, to just share some bits as well, a bit of what other people have said, just building upon that, like Andy saying, exploring other games. I've done that myself, like because of lockdown and everyone was so excited with the Switch at the time, I suddenly discovered there was this super cheap bundle of the whole like Wii U and 3DS sets, and I just got that, and now I have too many old games to play. But but like Andy said, I'm usually playing games to sort of like explore the design. What did they do and then I guess, yeah, if you've been in the industry, or if you've actually don't even have to be, just start making games, you sort of like enjoy guessing what's happening behind the curtain, as it were. So
Mm.
there's that, and then also you don't even have to feel that you must push yourself to get a games industry job. Maybe you start liking it, but then maybe you like coding way more than any of that. And I think that one takeaway is yes, games is really good, and many of us are really passionate about being in the industry, but there's so many other ways, and coding, just even doing it once in your life, even as parents here, is good, because even in your job, it can help you work better with other people in technical roles. And yeah, that's my comment.
Oh, it's so true. It's so true. I think that that's really, really great to end on. And yeah, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Creative Assembly, Joanna, Paul, and Cal. You were amazing. And thank you so much, Andy, as well. The Family Video Game Database is really, really incredible. You definitely have to check it out. And also, of course, follow Creative Assembly for all of the latest opportunities there, and Into Games as well, because Into Games is always doing amazing work with games industry. Follow the Discord as well, because the Discord, there are always so many amazing initiatives happening and events happening. But yeah, thank you all so much again. I'm Lauren, and I hope you all had a really, really great night, and I will see you all again soon. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, everyone. Nice to see you all. Bye.
Bye.